I want to welcome Peter Metcalf, owner of Black Diamond, and Caroline Bird, GYC's executive director, to the stage. Peter, Caroline.
Jeff, thanks for those nice comments, and I want to correct one comment, which is I'm not the owner of Black Diamond. We're a publicly traded company, so all of you just need to look at NASDAQ, BDE, and you too can become an owner in the company. So I do have some prepared remarks that I think I do want to stick to, but before I start, I want to share a couple of things. First off, how about today? What an amazing day to be in the greater Yellowstone area, huh? You know, if you need a shot of inspiration as to why you're here, why you support the GYC, this day like today will carry you for at least a year. This magical place. I rode up with Rick into up towards Norris, and between the elk, the buffalo, the hot springs, the blue sky, these incredibly lush lodgepole pines, the blue sky, the warm temperatures, I thought, there's no question about it. This is the best, last great place in the United States. So it's wonderful to have you here, and it's such a joy to be here to celebrate the GYC 30 years of protecting the best place in America. And I should say that as I was riding with Rick, I was reminded of something of a few years ago. He and I have known each other for a long time. He was one not too long ago climbing, I suppose, probably without a shirt, and some young kid looked at him and said, "Dude, you are one fit geezer." And today, as he kept disappearing into the distance in front of me, I thought, "Dude, you are one aerobic animal and fast geezer." So I'm going to go to my formal remarks here. So let me say it is absolutely my sincere, enthusiastic pleasure and privilege to join Caroline in honoring and awarding my good friend and mentor, Rick Reese, with the Greater Yellowstone Coalition's 30th Anniversary Award for sustained leadership and lasting contribution for his life's work as a champion on behalf of this absolutely magnificent ecosystem that we call the Greater Yellowstone area. For that matter, honoring Rick and bestowing this award upon him was a discussion that began over a year ago, and hence when it was finalized and I was approached by the GYC as to whether Black Diamond would like to be one of the presenting sponsors, I leaped at the chance on behalf of BD and approached my lifelong friends at Patagonia to join us, and there was no hesitation whatsoever. So let me explain why. So I'm going to start with, I got to do a little bit of a commercial pitch, but this is sincere. So Black Diamond was created to champion the issues of great importance on behalf of a fellow community of mountain, canyon, and crag enthusiasts. Fundamentally, we deliver on that mission in two ways. First, by the innovative and robust gear, equipment, and now apparel that we deliver to our community. And secondly, by supporting those groups and those individuals fighting to protect the inspiring places that we and our community go to ply our craft. The Greater Yellowstone ecosystem is perhaps the most magnificent and wild of any place in the lower 48, and both the GYC and Rick Reese have been integral in the battle to keep America's best last place as it is. So let me focus on my dear friend, Rick Reese. Today, the creation of the idea of the term bucket list of what experiences you desire to still have in your life has become a bit of a tired cliche. I also believe that more influential in our lives, and in the end more meaningful than a bucket list of experiences, are the special people that you've intimately come to know, mentored yourself to, become better because of their influences on your life. I myself am blessed to have had in my lifetime a handful of meaningful relationships or apprenticeships with some of the most remarkable and accomplished people of my day in the fields of rock climbing and alpinism, business academia, as well as business entrepreneurship, humanitarian efforts, and literature, conservation, and environmentalism. These have been people who are not only greatly accomplished, but are also profound and innovative thinkers, sustained activists, and outgoing individuals whose legacy is based as much upon those that they have touched and transformed into disciples as by what they directly have accomplished. Rick Reese is without question one of those truly extraordinary individuals. His contributions to the greater Yellowstone region and Western conservation extend beyond his very considerable direct contributions. For that matter, I believe that Rick Reese is the most influential, accomplished, impactful, but least famous conservationist of the last 30 years. I say that in part because so much of Rick's impact and contribution is because of his genius to see that one can often be far more impactful in the role of strategist, innovator, researcher, planner, and at times the brains quietly residing behind higher profile people already in positions of leadership. For Rick, it's never been about him or his ego. It's always about us, the community, the end game, the goal, and the vision, combined with the discipline on what we are trying to accomplish. There are few people I know with Rick's unique combination of upbeat energy, optimism, warmth, strategic intelligence, candor, and tactical executional acumen. And he combines that with another unique and absolutely compelling trait: a heartfelt and enthusiastic interest in you and what you are doing and the role that you can play in some big adventure, some goal, or grand strategy. But he is also able to give wise, sage-like, constructive input with a candor that others are unable to do without generating negative and non-productive reactions. Likewise, there are few that combine Rick's, what I would call Don Quixote, wide-eyed ability to envision that which is not, with the skills to actually achieve it. This personality and approach to life surely owes itself to many sources and a handful of unique and diverse people who have had a profound influence on who Rick is today. To mention three helps capture the rich complexity of who Rick Reese is. The first was his climbing mentor, Rich Ream, one of the few accomplished Utah climbers of his day. And though more than twice Rick's age, he took Rick under his wing and shared his wealth of experience and mature good judgment. Rich played an integral role in Rick having a life forged with climbing as a defining part of it. This helps you understand that who Rick really is. And I want to quote a very famous climber and photographer, Galen Rull, who once observed, and I'm quoting, "At the heart of the mountaineering experience lies optimistic expectation, the belief that tomorrow has got to be better than today." And to me, a great conservationist requires intelligence, optimism, and will, qualities that define successful alpinists. Or to say it differently, your intelligence makes you a pessimist, but your will makes you an optimist. Don Quixote, who believes that he or she can accomplish almost anything if you commit everything to it. The second major influence of Rick's was his University of Utah professor, Charles Monson, who introduced Rick to philosophy and gave him the confidence to complete an undergrad degree on the subject, which in turn generated Rick's interest in graduate school and ultimately his PhD work with the Colombian insurgency. As you know, philosophy is the major of understanding life, society, and the interplay of the two, and that has been foundational in Rick's lifetime of work. Last and not least, the Colombian Guatemalan Catholic priest who Rick worked with in the late 60s as a part of his PhD thesis. As Rick has shared with me, their struggles for social justice in the face of elitist regimes were shining examples of doing what they believed was right in the face of daunting, often dangerous, and at times life-threatening, overwhelming government repression. So when you combine these three very different and discrete influences on Rick, you begin to understand the forces that forged this very charismatic, energizing, quietly iconoclastic, quixotic, intuitively strategic, and tenacious executor that is Rick Reese. Rick has a gravitas that comes from what I call a deep existence in life. With this background, you can begin to understand how over the past 50 years, Rick has not only influenced hundreds of decision makers and leaders on behalf of conservation, but has on his own an unmatched record of leadership, of accomplishment, of contributions. And a very edited list that I'd like to share with you includes, which you obviously know, is his role as the principal founder and the first two-term president of the GYC, a story that I hope he will share with you this evening. Vice chair of the Yellowstone Business Partnership, chair of the Bonneville Shoreline Trail and leader in its creation, member of the Salt Lake County Wasatch Canyons Planning Commission, chair of the Coalition to Save Mount Helena, director of Government and Community Relations at the University of Utah, director of the Yellowstone Institute, executive secretary of the Montana Board of Education, a Grand Teton climbing ranger, which included a citation for valor from the Secretary of Interior for the now famous 1967 rescue of badly injured climbers off the north face of the Grand, something that is in the book We Inspired, and that Ted Wilson, who's here today's daughter, is making a movie on, whose grand premiere is just a month away. You know, interestingly enough, it was this accomplishment that ultimately led Rick in the winter of 1970 to Montana for the first time. He was asked by government officials in the winter of 1970 to organize another rescue in the tragedy on Mount Cleveland. The multitude of mountain ranges that appeared out of the small plane window created an epiphany that he and his life's partner, Mary Lee, would see and then realize they would have to move to Montana. I could go on and I could go on, but I don't think there's any need to continue to list Rick's achievements. Rick's life has been one of dedication and accomplishment on behalf of our communities, our landscapes, and the interplay of the two. Tonight, we're honoring Rick for his nearly lifetime of work here in the greater Yellowstone region, a place that revealed itself and spoke to Rick over 40 years ago as he peered out of that rescue plane's window. The region has profoundly forged who Rick is as a person, and simultaneously, this region's future is being forged by the strengths of the vision of the person it itself has forged. The West, all of us, our children, and a generation not yet born will be the benefactors of Rick's 4+ decades of ongoing work and leadership. That is what we are honoring tonight in our own small but symbolic and certainly highly appreciative way. We are also honoring him tonight because we want to encourage him with all his energy, his skills, his leadership, and experience to keep up the good fight on our behalf. I think Rick is in the prime of his middle age, and we all want to benefit from that as he continues the good fight for us. And now, before I pass this podium on to Bob Springmeyer, it is also my pleasure to announce and read a very succinct proclamation of appreciation by the citizens of Salt Lake, awarded on their behalf to Rick Reese by his mayor and friend, Ralph Becker. And let me read that, but I have to step back and grab it. So I have here a proclamation from the mayor of Salt Lake City, Ralph Becker. Let me read this to you. It's fairly succinct. Whereas Rick Reese grew up hiking, climbing, and backcountry skiing in Utah's Wasatch Range, developing an appreciation plus deep, abiding commitment to the natural beauty of the surrounding area, along with a recognition of a call to preserve this landscape for generations to come. And whereas through academic study and an extended participation in natural settings throughout the West and in the world, Rick became a leader in preservation and protection of wilderness ecosystems. And whereas through his leadership, the Greater Yellowstone Coalition and the Bonneville Shoreline Trail Committee developed from ideas and concepts into reality. Now, therefore, I, Ralph Becker, Mayor of Salt Lake City, Utah, do hereby declare October 2013 to be Rick Reese Appreciation Month. Woohoo! And to wrap this up and encourage all who have benefited from his leadership, his commitment, and success to protect open spaces he loves, to honor the gifts he has provided through his hard work, dedication, and a lifetime of love for our natural beauty. Signed, Mayor Ralph Becker.
But I am just honored to be here, and while I don't know Rick well, I feel like I'm in his footsteps and all of your footsteps as this new executive director of the Greater Yellowstone Coalition. So I owe you a huge debt of gratitude. And I do have a couple more short stories about Rick and his association with GYC. In 1980, Rick had a lucrative job as a rising star in education, was building a comfortable life in Montana, comfortable Montana life with his bride, Mary Lee, who's also his wife. Everything changed during a simple lunch with then Yellowstone National Park Superintendent John Townsley. John had asked Rick at the time, "How would you and Mary Lee like a job in Yellowstone? I can offer you $9,000 a year." Rick's first thought at the time was, "Why on earth would I do that?" I would love to ask what Mary Lee thought. His second thought then surfaced, well, it's Yellowstone. Soon after, with Mary Lee's blessing, they were living hand to mouth and loving every minute of it in a stone house between the Albright Visitor Center and the superintendent's office in Mammoth, The rest, as they say, is history for the Greater Yellowstone Coalition, for Yellowstone National Park, and for this incomparable, intact, remarkable landscape that we all love, that we call the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. For it was while Rick and John sat at a picnic table in a grassy area outside the park's headquarters eating sandwiches and popcorn that John shared a vision he'd inherited from Horace Albright, one of Yellowstone's first superintendents and eventually a close friend of Rick's. Rick and John talked about the urgent need for a voice dedicated solely to protecting Yellowstone and the novel idea of protecting the park's 2.2 million acres by protecting an additional 6 to 8 million acres of land, water, and wildlife surrounding it. Could such an unprecedented concept be sold? With some of the region's wildest areas under siege, it was worth a try. Rick started by reaching out to other starry-eyed idealists, some of whom are here with us tonight. And it turns out they were having similar epiphanies. And the result, 3 decades later, is the people in this room, members and supporters of the Greater Yellowstone Coalition. And for 30 years, we have been America's voice for a Greater Yellowstone. Today, we see the fruits of Rick's labor of love and those pioneer conservationists who locked arms with him. Well, a few years ago, when Rick turned 62, he went to the Social Security Administration to sign up for his retirement benefits. "Mr. Reese," the woman there asked, "were you ill for about 5 years in the early 80s? Your income diminished by about 80%. Those must have been hard years." Au contraire, Rick will tell you today, those early days in Yellowstone were the best years of his life. And they were a blessing for all of us who love the Greater Yellowstone. For all you've done, we say thank you, Rick, for your vision, your inspiration, your leadership, your guidance, your creativity, and your passion. Before I ask Rick to join us on stage, I'd like to have Peter read the inscription on his award.
Yeah, I actually have it here. So it's Rick Reese. We've got 2 parts to this: an ice axe with an inscription and a plaque. And again, it's a small honor, but consider it a way to manifest our appreciation and thanks to you, and it's a bit of a talisman as well. Rick Reese, founder, advocate, and supporter of the Greater Yellowstone Coalition, and tireless champion for one of the last great intact ecosystems on Earth, Greater Yellowstone Coalition 30th Anniversary Award. And then inscribed on the axe is Rick Reese, in honor of 30 years of GYC leadership, inspiration, and service, September 2013. So voila. Thank you, Rick. You're very modest.
Wow. As Peter and Bob were speaking, I was looking around for this man, Rick Reese, because that's not familiar to me. But then I looked at this, at my name tag and this list of citations, and then I knew that it was me. Thank you so much, Peter, for that extremely thoughtful and generous introduction. It means a lot coming from you as the incredibly supportive conservationist you have been, both in your life and in Black Diamond. Black Diamond is a remarkable company. Black Diamond Equipment, of course, was the initial company. They now, Black Diamond Inc. now owns Gregory Pack and POC and Peeps, snow safety equipment. But Peter has dedicated a good share of Black Diamond equipment to conservation, and it's just absolutely wonderful. And thank you, Peter. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. I have to make one small correction, Peter, in your introduction, because the young man who was impressed with my aged prowess didn't say you're one big geezer. He said you're one honed geezer. That's a big difference, I can tell you. Anyway, need to put on my glasses here, thank you. This award, this beautiful award, really, truly belongs to hundreds of people who collectively volunteered thousands of hours beginning in 1981 all the way to here tonight. I mean, I'm honored to be designated as the hood ornament, if you will, that symbolizes the enormous effort to build a new organization for a new purpose in this outstanding land we call the Greater Yellowstone. But we are really here tonight because of all of you and hundreds of others who aren't here. A moment ago, the story was told about my meeting of Townsley and his offer to give me a 75% pay cut, give up health insurance, state retirement, and move to Yellowstone. When he said that, I thought for a moment, and he could see the distress on my face, and he said, by the way, you can live in the Lamar Valley. And I said, I still don't think this is going to work, John, but I'll go home and I'll talk to Mary Lee. She is the heart of our family, was then and still is, the incredible mom of our 2 children. And I told her what Townsley has said, and she thought about it for about 10 seconds and said, yes, let's go for it. So without her early enthusiasm, I would never have heard the term Greater Yellowstone. I would never have been inspired about it. I would never have written about it. I would never have spent those 5 halcyon seasons in the Lamar Valley. And the case for the Greater Yellowstone would never have permeated my soul. So Mary Lee's decision that night and all of the support she has given to this through the years makes her, in my mind, certainly one of the principal founders of the Greater Yellowstone Coalition. And she was also a pivotal person in the success of the Yellowstone Institute. You've heard the story about Townsley and how he introduced me to the term Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. He planted a seed that day that very quickly led to early conversations with some particularly key people. One was Ralph Mon. Ralph is here tonight. He was with the Sierra Club in Idaho. He and I think, started thinking the same thoughts independently, and this quickly merged. A second was Joan Montaigne, and Joan and Cliff are here tonight. Joan was then president of MWA, and she jumped on with both feet, said we can use MWA's office and we can use MWA's resources. So those 2 were very early on important. Bill Cunningham, who was then working for the Wilderness Society, those three, and within a few months, Bob Anderson, who's here tonight. Bob provided an enormous amount of staff work to make all of this happen. We recognized early, within 6 or 8 months, that Yellowstone was not an island and that it faced some ominous threats outside its boundaries. Some of you who were around in those days will remember Secretary of the Interior Jim Watt, who decided that it would be a good idea to open 92,000 acres of the Washakie Wilderness to oil and gas leasing. Some of you remember the threat of what I can only call hyper-industrial scale mining just outside Cook City. Some of you can remember when private lands in Island Park were already under lease for geothermal drilling, with no thought whatsoever as to whether or not this would disturb the thermal features of Yellowstone. We also understood the enormous value of a greater Yellowstone ecosystem. And this was about far more than 2 national parks. Yellowstone and Grand Teton together only comprise 15% of the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. And we figured out early, I think, how to articulate the concept so that people could understand it in their minds and, even more importantly, feel it in their hearts. That was really what got us going. But good ideas by themselves, of course, mean nothing. Even compelling ideas, they count for little. And that's where the story of the Greater Yellowstone Coalition as an organization began. In June 1983, we organized a group of people to come together at a founding convention of the Teton Science School. The convention was wildly successful, and out of that grand meeting came the all-important steering committee. These are the people that really created GYC as an organization. In June 1984, we met for the first time as a formal organization with an elected board. Bob Barbie, on behalf of the park, welcomed us to Yellowstone. Over the course of those next 3 conventions, supervisors of every national forest in the greater Yellowstone appeared at our meetings and spoke. Superintendents of both parks spoke. The Venerable Marty Murray gave a major address that few of us will ever forget. A young congressman from Wyoming named Dick Cheney was a featured speaker in 1965. There were others: Joe Sachs, Luna Leopold, Max Peterson, Chief of the United States Forest Service. They were all there. And that part I mentioned a moment ago about heart, on the last morning of the 1986 convention, Dave Love, legendary author and beloved master of Yellowstone geology, invited all comers to join him for a several-hour walk near Lake Butte. That's what happened in those early years. Believe me, the passion and the sense of possibility and the promise was so deeply felt. And we had the attention of America. Finally, let me return to just a moment to that 1984 convention. For it was here that a board member, Hank Phibbs, presented a document that he had drafted. And it was entitled the Greater Yellowstone Ecosystem Comprehensive Management Act. And in less than 5 pages, it provided a roadmap for coordinated multi-agency ecosystem-wide management of the Greater Yellowstone. In 1984, of course, it went nowhere. And no wonder. We were a tiny new organization with a few hundred members and a few $1,000s. We had no regional, much less national constituency. Ronald Reagan was president. Jim Watt had been Secretary of the Interior for the previous 2 years, and the country was in the very worst recession since the 1930s. But the grandiosity of our enthusiasm and idealism and wild expectation was something to behold. That was then. But the concept was right in 1984, and it's still right in 2013. To me, it is the holy grail of Yellowstone ecosystem conservation. And we may now be at the brink of a remarkable opportunity to undertake a campaign for what could be one of the most significant conservation achievements since the creation of the National Park Service itself. GYC is the only conservation organization in America whose mission is the protection of the entire Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. We are uniquely positioned to launch this initiative in a true partnership with dozens of other conservation organizations. We should pursue it with all the energy and resources and allies and commitment we can muster. GYC today is akin to a magnificent sailing ship built with the finest materials to the highest standards, staffed by a talented professional crew, well-funded. Our ship is safe in the harbor, but that's not what magnificent sailing ships are built for. It's time to set sail on the rough, open sea in pursuit of the holy grail of ecosystem management. And if not now, when? And if not us, who? Thank you.